I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Oh, it's so nice to meet you. I love your background, by the way.
Thank you. Well, when you have a face that's sort of made for radio, you need something to distract people. So this,
Oh, it looks so good.
I, I appreciate it. Can you just talk a little bit about how you got this role? I'm assuming you auditioned, and when you auditioned, what did they tell you about the role? What did they give you to work with?
Sure, that's a great question. I did audition for this role. Um, it was early last year, and I was so excited to get the audition because I loved the breakdown of the character, Teddy Isaacs. It was a really simple breakdown. It was just Teddy Isaacs. She is a grad student. She's also the site manager out on the Navajo reservation, and she works for Dr. Reynolds, who is sort of her mentor, if you will. I got the sense that she was a very intelligent, hardworking, get her hands dirty kind of woman, and definitely someone back in the 70s who there's not many, female archaeologists out on dig sites in the 70s. So she was sort of a renegade, if you will. And I thought that was a really exciting prospect to play a character like her.
And it's not a glamorous role at all.
No. And funny enough, I obviously, when I auditioned for the part, I didn't get dirty per
Yeah.
se. Put dirt on me. I don't normally, go that extreme with stuff, but I kind of forgot that when I got to set the first day, just how dirty you will be out there. And so when I went to hair and makeup and I did the test, I was like, oh wow, yeah. She's dirty and she's sunburnt and she is not glamorous to say the least, which again for me I personally loved because I love getting dirty and I love, parts where you're not necessarily worried about how your hair looks, if that makes sense.
Now, can you talk about sort of the process? I'm always fascinated with the acting side of this.
Sure.
You do shows where you're going in, you're in an episode or two, you're in an episode of Pulse. What's
Yeah.
that process like? Because you really have to serve the show and the ensemble that's there, but you also want to carry your own weight. And yeah, how do you sort of approach that? Like with Dark Winds, how do you approach? I'm going in for X amount of screen time. I want to count, but you don't want to be one of those people that tries to show off to impress people.
That is such a good point, Rick. And you're kind of spot on where you really do have to balance out why you're there and how you're going to approach the work for that specific show and that specific character. Because there are parts where maybe you're coming in for a day, but your character and her arc is serving a really important purpose. And so for me, I like to think first and foremost about what is going on in the story. Like you said, how is my character, what am I servicing to the story and also to the leads, right? How am I supporting them? And then finding my own personal ways to really elevate my work because, I want to come in there and it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm here. It's all about me. That's not the way I approach my job. But, of course, I want people to remember my character. Of course, I want to have impact. So I like to really find those moments and those places where I can do that without taking away from the show at all. But, maybe have a moment or two where someone goes, wow, I remember that woman. I remember that character. She left a mark on me. So it is definitely a balance.
Well, that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about the show, was just that, you don't have a lot of screen time, but
Mhm.
it was a memorable role, and it was really one of those characters. I saw the screeners pretty early on before I knew I was going to talk to you, and I remembered seeing her and thinking, wow, there's a backstory there I want to hear. The 70s archaeologist
Yeah.
working in a man's world. There's something there that I'd really like to see more of.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. I feel like, yeah, I've had a few people be like, wow, like, you really kind of transformed into a different person. And that means a lot to me. But yeah, I definitely think Teddy's backstory and like you said, this woman out on a dig site working very much in a man's world. And that's the thing, it's especially back in the 70s, like it's all men, right? Especially in that specific world. Yeah, I just think that characters like that are the most interesting to me. And again, I think you'll see, and I don't know how many episodes you saw on the screeners, but all the character stories this season, I feel
Yeah.
like serve a very important purpose. So I'm so grateful
Yeah, I
that
don't
you
want
thought
to.
about
I've
mine.
I've had a chance to see. Well, they sent the last two yesterday or today, so I haven't seen the last two, but I've seen the
Oh,
other ones.
I'm
So
so excited.
yeah, so and I don't want to give away too much, to people ahead of time, but um, I was reading more about you that you started out as a dancer, and I'm fascinated with that because I've talked to a lot of actresses who started as dancers, and one of the
Oh,
things they've told me is that the disciplines that you learn as a dancer really translate pretty well sometimes to acting. This idea of
mhm.
working with an ensemble, of of knowing your place in the group, of standing out, of knowing what you're doing, so that the whole process doesn't stop because you screwed up somehow. I want. Do you find that to be the case as well?
100%. Yeah. And again, you bring up so many good points. And I didn't even realize Jenna Elfman, that she also
Yeah.
has a dance background. And Jenna, I love Jenna. She's amazing. But yeah, it's interesting because there are quite a few dancers who then transition into acting. And I think the performance aspect obviously is totally different. There's physicality in both worlds. But I do agree that the disciplines that you learn in dance translate so well to the screen. Because again, for me, when I was dancing, I was in the corps de ballet and I would do solo parts as well. But I feel like I kind of work in the corps de ballet now as an actor where I come in, I perform, I support the leads. And personally, I love that. It's so fulfilling for me to see my co-stars, for example, like Zahn McLaren, shine as brightly as they do, and to be like, wow, maybe that day I was able to support him in some way that I'm not even aware of. And I also just think the discipline of taking your craft seriously, as a dancer, it's all business and it's hardcore and it's a really hard world, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And it's the same as acting. You have to be so resilient and persistent, and you cannot for a second give up on your path and your passions. And I think that's kind of what's helped me get to where I am today, if I'm being honest.
Well, you talked about how hard dancing was, and it's obviously been a lot of years.
Yeah.
Do you miss it at all? I mean, I did stand up all of my 20s. Now, I wouldn't go back and
Oh,
do it now, but
yeah.
I'll see somebody doing it and just think, it'd be interesting to do this again.
Yes. Oh, you should. You should. It's funny, right before this, I was at dance class,
Oh,
you
there
know,
you go.
and it's not the same, right? I was at one point dancing 6, 7 hours a day. But for me, I love being back in class with my friends, people who've become my friends, and just putting on a performance for that day. Some days it's good, some days it's trash, and that's okay. But for me, I still try to not only dance, but to support, the arts and specifically ballet. I was a ballet dancer. So, if I go to New York, I love to see the New York City Ballet or ABT and
Hmm.
just continue to support dancers however I can.
It's just getting back. You mentioned with dancing about supporting it and the different roles, and I'm just wondering, as an actress,
Yeah.
is there a type of role that you would like to tackle? Not necessarily, people always say, what movie would you like to be in? Nah. But I mean, is there a type of character where you think, it would be fun to just bite into this and see what I can do with it?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, this role in particular was definitely a dream of mine because I think most of my career I've played very similar characters, and you hear that from a lot of actors where you get typecast. And so I played a lot of housewives, kind of abused wife,
Yeah.
victimized women, if you will. This role felt very empowering to me, and this was a very intelligent woman, a well-spoken woman, and I'm also a science nerd, so deep in my heart, I wanted to be a biologist, but an archaeologist is pretty close. Um, So this is definitely a dream role. And I think for me, honestly, exploring more dark comedy. I actually love comedy and I've done mostly drama and dramatic roles. So I would love to sink my teeth into something fun and funny and kind of lighthearted. That's sort of what I'm keeping my fingers crossed on next is to do something totally outside the box.
So scientist comedian, perfect role then.
Yeah, you and I mean, you can do your stand up and maybe I can be your
Uh,
supporting. You never know.
I don't know. Before I wrap this up, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the podcast, which is really different than the acting that you're doing. Yeah, how
Oh,
did you get involved in that? And
the pandemic was obviously such a weird, challenging time, but because I had so much free time, I studied journalism in college. And so I had an agent at one point and I was developing shows in the unscripted space and mostly in the crime world. And so I would pitch shows. I actually had a development deal and pitched a show. And it did not sadly get picked up. This was in 2021. But because I had done so much development work on it, I went to my agent at the time and said, I think I can make this into a podcast. And he was like, yeah, I think you can too. And I had never done a podcast, but I just felt like, again, I had researched this particular crime for over 2 years. And so I got a podcast deal. I sold, my podcast, and then I spent the next 6 months just writing the podcast and producing it, which was a really amazing experience as well. And it's not acting necessarily, but at that time, it really flexed this creative muscle of mine. And it was really wonderful because I got to work with folks, victims of these families, they're the families of the victims, excuse me, who the work that I was doing at the time, it meant a lot to them because it really brought some attention to what they were dealing with. And so it was just a very fulfilling, different experience.
what does that do to you emotionally? I mean, I worked on a couple of stories, a couple of projects that involve abuse, and particularly with acting and young kids, and it wrings you out in ways that's really difficult to describe.
Rick, that is why I want to do some type of lighthearted comedy.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it is you have to be so emotionally invested as you know, and it was really tough, but the feedback that I got and again some of the positives that came out of it was feeling like I connected with a group of people who no one wanted to connect with, and that made me feel good. But I definitely needed to take a step back and like just go lay on a beach after a bit because your heart is so invested in what they're dealing with. And I lost my grandmother in a very tragic way.
Oh,
So I
sorry.
just empathized greatly with them, and felt like maybe on another level, it was my grandmother was kind of like, I want you to do this thing. So it was really meaningful. I'll never forget it.
Well, I hate to end things on a down note, but I guess that's hey, how about those
No.
comedies?
Yeah.
But
Yes, hopefully.
this was a really great conversation. Really enjoyed your work in Dark Winds and other things that you've done, and I look forward to talking to you again. This was great.
You too, Rick. Yeah, enjoy the last two episodes and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Bye.